Registries and relationships. In this lecture, you'll learn about registries. Registries are the runtime components that manage instances of assets and participants. In this lecture, you'll also learn about an import statement. Import statement allows you to refer to resources defined in other namespaces or other files. And you'll also learn about how to create or define relationship between resources. In this lecture, we will extend the Acme Airline domain model. We'll create version 4 of the model, which will establish the relationship between the flight and the aircraft assigned to it. Registries manage instances of resources that are created at runtime. Each instance which is in the registry has a unique identity, also known as its key. There's a separate registry for each resource type. So here, for example, you see an aircraft registry and a participant registry. To describe the concepts in this lecture, I'll use a simplified view of the registry. Oftentimes, you need to depict relationship between the resources. Now, to give you an idea, I'll talk about the registry first. So as you know, there are multiple types of registries maintained within the business network. For example, the participant registry has all the participants, and the assets registry has all the assets. Each of these participants and assets are identified by those keys you see here. So for example, P1 and P2 are the keys that identify the participants in the registry. A1 through A3 are the unique keys that identify each of these assets. An example of a relation is P1 owns asset A2. Another example would be, let's say there is another type of asset B, and this B type asset has a key B3, and we want to depict a relationship whereas A3 owns or contains B3. Relationships are depicted in the resource model by using a special symbol dash dash greater than. This is the symbol you would use instead of the regular character O to depict relationship between resources. You can think of a relationship field or attribute as a pointer to a specific asset type. Let me explain what that means. Let's say in the asset registry, we have two types of assets, type A and type B. Let's say this is the definition of the type A resource. It's an asset. What you can do is, in a resource that is pointing to an asset of type A, you can create an attribute of field which is of type A, and instead of O, you would use dash dash greater than. Now this pointer to A can point to any of these assets of type A, but pointer to A cannot point to an asset which is not of type A. So in this case, this is not allowed. Why? Because pointer to A is of type A, and we are trying to point to an asset of type B. Earlier in the lecture on arrays, I talked about the relationship between the flight and the aircraft asset. The aircraft gets assigned to the flights depending on the demand on that route and also depending on other logistical parameters. So for example, on a specific day, flight 103 may be using the aircraft 001, and on that same day, flight 101 and 102 may be using craft 003. On another day, this may look totally different. So this kind of a relationship can be easily maintained with the relationship construct offered by the modeling language. As you have seen, that resource definitions are spread across multiple namespaces, and there is a need sometime, in fact many a times, to refer resources from one resource space in another resource space. And that can be done by using the import keyword. Now, as an example, let's consider the flight resource in the org.acme.airline.flight namespace. Now, this resource has to refer to the aircraft, which is in a different namespace, org.acme.airline.aircraft.aircraft. So this is the resource it needs to refer to as part of the relationship. In order to do that, I'll have to add the import statement. And the import statement can be used for importing a single resource from the namespace, or you can use the static to import all the resources defined in the namespace. Another thing is that you can have multiple import statements in your resource definition file. So let's go ahead and add the import statement. So I'm importing org.acme.airline.aircraft in the namespace org.acme.airline.flight. And we're going to refer to the aircraft resource in the flight resource. And to do that, I'll add another variable here with the relationship notation, not the O. And I have the aircraft and the name of the field is aircraft. Now, one thing to understand here is that when the flight is getting created, at that time the aircraft may not be assigned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this field as optional. And at this point, we have defined the relationship between flight and the aircraft. You need to provide the value for the relationship field in a specific format. The value is a fully qualified resource name, a fixed character pound, followed by the identity of the asset that you are assigning to the relationship field. So let's say there is a flight AE101 and the logistics team has decided to assign craft 001 to this flight. The way the value will be assigned for the aircraft field in the flight resource is by providing the org.acme.airline.aircraft.aircraft, which is the fully qualified resource name, followed by the pound, which is constant, and then you provide the identity of the asset. So this is how you would provide the value for a relationship field. As you will add more files to your model, it will become difficult for you to test your changes in the playground. So what my suggestion would be that as your model starts to grow, start using the CLI tool for creating the network archive file that you can then deploy to playground. So the way it will work is you would create a new directory, call it dist, and then you will run the composer CLI command, composer archive create -a. Here you provide the full path to your BNA file, which is the business network archive file. You provide the source type, which is a directory, and the source name, which is current directory. So you need to be in the root directory of your project folder. Once you run this command, the archive file is created that can simply be deployed to the playground. Let's try out this model in the playground. Now I've already created a directory by the name dist, and I'm going to run the composer command to generate the BNA file. And it was successful. I'll upload the BNA file and deploy. Connect. And as you can see, we have these three files: aircraft, flight, and participant. Now, if you go to the test, you can see our three participants and two assets of type aircraft and flight. Let's first create one aircraft. So I'm going to just create a new asset. You can use the data which is available in the model files at the end. I'll just copy this and paste it here. So now we have created our first aircraft, which is having an ID of craft 001. Next, we're going to create a flight. The data is in the flight model. Just copy and paste. So here you would see that I don't have the optional field aircraft, which is the relationship field. First, we'll just create it. So at this point, we have one aircraft and one flight. And if you look at the details of the flight, the aircraft field is not there because it's optional. It is okay. Next thing we are going to do is add a reference to the aircraft 001 to the flight AE101. And to do that, we'll click on the edit here and just provide a comma, enter, and copy this line here that has the reference to aircraft and paste it here. Update. And at this point, we have a flight which is pointing to an aircraft with an ID craft 001. One obvious thing that we need to think through is what happens if the referenced resource is deleted. For example, let's say Acme Air has sold a craft 001. Now it's no more available. In that case, what happens to the relationship? The relationship will basically lead to the field returning a null value when it's referenced. So deletion of referred resource leads to a return of null value. Another point about the deletion is that the relationship is unidirectional. In other words, the deletion of the referrer has no impact on the referred resource. So if the flight AE101 is deleted, the instance of the aircraft identified as craft001 will not be impacted. Let's summarize. In this lecture, I talked about import and relationship. Typically, you will create models which will be spread across multiple namespaces, in other words, multiple files. If you want to access or refer to a resource which is in a different namespace, you can use the import statement. You can have multiple import statements in the resource file. You can import a single resource or all resources by using the asterisk or wildcard. You can create relationship fields as part of the resource definition. You can think of the relationship field in a resource definition as a reference or a pointer to a resource. The operator that you use instead of the character O is dash dash greater than. The value assignment for a relationship field requires you to provide the fully qualified resource name followed by hash or pound followed by the identity of the resource.